This week we're looking at Misha Tate's podcast with Patrick McKeown, who obviously is the creator of Oxygen Advantage and the Oxygen Advantage method, who, full disclaimer, I'm a coach in, so some bias here going into this video. But what I think is interesting is Misha Tate's questions and answers, intrigues that she has for Patrick McKeown. He obviously answers it in a very quick and comprehensive way, so go check out the full podcast for that. That's not why we're here. We're here to look at these few clips that I actually found interesting, which highlight a few interesting points to me. So without any further ado, let's get into this.
If you are getting ready for a fight, like myself, and I want to get, hyper focused. I want to be comfortable with my heart rate being a bit elevated, and I want to feel ready for some kind of physical exertion or engaging in a fight or flight response in a way. Do you think there's a good way to prepare on the other side of this for athletes? Or
I think this question is very interesting because I think when we often talk about breathing or when people are first exposed to doing some kind of breath training, you immediately go to someone that is shoeless, barefoot, in Tesco's, who looks a bit out there, and you think of it as a very woo-woo kind of training. But actually there are multifacets to this, and part of that training is going to the other end of that spectrum and getting more scientific, like you do with the Oxygen Advantage method and the way I coach, but also with the fact that you want to upregulate. It's not just this calm down regulation, hitting a gong and doing a sound bath. This is all part of it, of course, and there is ways to use breath work to recover, of course, but there are also ways to upregulate so that you can get yourself focused and get into what we call the flow state, which we'll discuss a bit more in this video. There's a couple of clips of that coming up.
Any preparation will start, of course, in the weeks and months before, using breathing techniques so that...
This, I think, super important is that employing breath work has a lead time. So adaptation is super important to when you're doing breath work, and I think that's something that we often overlook. We can think we can just do this bit of breath work that we've seen online or in a book or whatever, however you're consuming it or learning about it, and that it will work instantly. But actually a lot of it, and a lot of foundational stuff, needs a lot of lead time for you to adapt to this particular way of breathing, or this improved, optimized way of breathing, to get the most out of your performance.
Because you can bolt on breathing exercises onto your physical training.
Now, this is also very interesting because I think when we think of training, we think of more training, but actually, like Patrick McKeown is saying here, breath training bolts onto your existing training, not adding to the workload, but adding value to each session. And I think that's super important to when we want to get involved, or when I want to get involved as a coach. I'm adding it to what you're currently doing. I'm not adding on top of what you're currently doing.
You don't want to go in with a thinking mind, because the thinking mind is too slow.
This is again like where we start talking about flow state. The thinking mind is too slow when you're trying to assess where you are with the ball, where the opposition team is, where your teammates are for the ball to go to, what strategy you're trying to employ currently in this state of play, so that you can either score or not concede or defend a corner, etc., etc. There's a lot of information going on there, and you don't want your working mind getting in the way. You want to be in this flow state where you're just doing what is necessary to get you to perform at your best and your team to perform at your best. And so you don't want to go in there with a working mind, and breath training and breathing can help you get there.
If you hyperventilate, you blow off a lot of carbon dioxide. That's driving up your blood pH, but that's increasing brain cell excitability. But also the loss of carbon dioxide is causing a reduction of blood flow to the brain. So you can be reducing blood flow to the brain by 20 to 40%.
Someone that goes over this subject a lot, there's often sometimes facts I forget, and this is one of them that I forgot. 20 to 40% reduction is super important when you're talking about the amount of oxygen that you need to be supplying to your brain, which takes 20% of the oxygen you breathe in every time. So yeah, this is one of those facts that I actually forgot, and always blows my mind when I hear it. So I don't know why I forget it, but it's super interesting. I think that when people talk about hyperventilation, which was popular a few years ago, actually it's maybe not adding as much value to you as an athlete in terms of what you want to be doing to perform at your best. Hyperventilation is probably not the best. But also the key other thing to hear before I carry on to the next clip is hyperventilation doesn't just have to be this heavy Wim Hof style breathing. Hyperventilation can be this panicked breathing, anxiety breathing, stress breathing, however you want to frame that. But you will go through some of that in certain points of your life. We all have stresses in our life, acute stresses, major stresses, etc. And hyperventilation, we can sometimes tip into that, and this is what can then lead to that 20 to 40% reduction. So that's something to bear in mind if you think that this doesn't apply to me. More than likely, these kinds of things do apply.
The huge factor in whether fighters tap. I know personally a lot of fighters who have tapped in a situation where they were caught in a chokehold, but it wasn't over, but they panicked and they tapped and they're like, oh, I panic tapped. I didn't have air for a second or two. And of course the body feels like it needs it. And mentally it was like, get out, get air, get out of the situation. And they tapped and they cost themselves an opportunity at victory by being not mentally prepared to deal with a situation where oxygen isn't necessarily readily available, or as you are reforming that as the tolerance of CO2. Now
this clip is very interesting because, okay, she's talking about jiu-jitsu, she's talking about tapping under a chokehold, specifically an air choke, not a blood choke. There is a difference. We don't need to get into that. But what we need to talk about here is tapping when you're under that pressure because your brain is telling you get out of this situation. We need to be somewhere else where we can breathe. The reason why I highlighted this, because it does, I think, apply to football. How many times when you're scrolling through your phone, or I know I just said football, but we're going to get to let me make my point here. How many times are you scrolling through your phone, you see something, you hold your breath slightly? How many times you're in a game, are you receiving or giving away the ball, or you're watching a situation and you're holding your breath, you're doing that, you're holding your breath. This every time, especially when you're under load, already trying to perform, already doing multiple sprints and decision making, etc., etc. How many times are you holding your breath? And this holding your breath means you're getting less oxygen, which means that your CO2 tolerance, or your CO2 is building up, and if your tolerance is low, your body is being affected by this. And this is where I think that sometimes when you can maybe receive the ball and you don't know what you do and you panic and you kick it away and it's this terrible decision, or it goes to the opposition, or it doesn't connect the way it should do, this could be one of those causal links, these dots we're putting together here. This could be one of those links here, is that your CO2 tolerance is low, and having it higher through breath training means you might not make so many of those mistakes where you're receiving the ball and you're panicking, you're giving the ball away, because you're getting yourself into a better flow state, into a better mental state, because you have better breathing.
Because in my trainings, we have implemented, I would say maybe 2 years ago, my trainers started to implement things like walking with our breath held and just counting the distance or counting the time, keeping the same pace, and seeing if we can build, if I can get a little bit further each time that we do this.
This is actually something called the movement breath test, so the MBT test, and this is something actually I use to assess people, which I think this coach is doing here with Misha Tate, to assess your CO2 tolerance levels, etc., etc. Very interesting test, very useful, something that is very easy to do and practical to do in any situation and in any environment that you're in, to assess someone I'm coaching. It's interesting that her coach was implementing this, because already I can see where that coach is probably thinking for her and her training in terms of programming breathing into it.
Like, you will have a support team around you as a professional fighter. You'll have your strength and conditioning, your nutritionist, your psychologist. You have all of these people. There's a role for breathing there, because breathing is what's going to dictate and set the limits.
Sometimes for someone like me, it can be the new kid in class, and it's all a bit awkward at first when I meet these kinds of teams of people, these strength and conditioning coaches, etc., etc., because everyone thinks you're there to steal their limelight, or that what you're doing is a bit more woo-woo, and what they're doing is the nuts and bolts of what works. But as I said before, a lot of breath training bolts onto current training, so you can work alongside these strength and conditioning coaches very easily. A lot of what you do in breathing does give you more positive results in those other areas, as Patrick McKeown is also highlighting there as well. But it is something I think is very important to understand, is that breath training isn't stepping on anyone's toes in anyone's field, or saying that anyone in any other field is wrong, but it's getting more out of that. Maybe it's 1% more, maybe it's 0.5% more, but in games of inches, in football, in mixed martial arts, etc., these all matter. And I can talk about the percentage gains and stuff all day, but until you see it on the pitch, until you experience it, you're not going to understand how much you're missing by not adding in this breath training program and getting a breath training coach to work alongside your PT, your strength and conditioning coach, etc., etc.
And if you have even a highly fit individual, well-trained athlete, if they're going around with their mouth open during the day, during sleep, they're going to be losing some of the gains that they have made during training. And the reason being is because they haven't looked at the breathing system. How we breathe has...
I thought I'd end on that clip because that clip highlights pretty much everything we just spoke about. If you're not doing breath training, even if you're an elite athlete, even if you're training at the elite level, if you're not employing some kind of breathing program, you're leaving gains on the table. You're not going to recover as quick. You're not going to adapt to the session you just had as well. And I just thought that's a very powerful clip to end on. Go back and listen to that clip again, and let that land for you, because it is a very important clip to understand the value that it holds. And this is not even saying that I'm the coach that you need, I'm the expert that you need to do this. There might be someone better for you, more ideally aligned with how you want to train and perform, etc. But I'm saying look into this deeper, because there are gains to be made from it. Anyway, that's everything I wanted to show in that podcast. That podcast is over an hour long and it's worth listening to, so go check it out on Misha Tate's YouTube channel. You can probably get it on Spotify and stuff like that, etc. Before you go, for me, if you could drop a like, if you could subscribe, hit that button down below. It costs you absolutely nothing but means the world to me if you do hit it, and also YouTube likes it as well. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Check out my website, firstwebreathe.co.uk. Check out my socials, First We Breathe, on any social platform, and there's always links to various free guides and stuff like that. But yeah, if you want to speak to me, then email, DM, speak to me, and I'm happy to help. I'm here for you guys. See you all very soon.